Welcome back to Throttle Tribe. Speed, power, adrenaline. These are the forces that draw riders to the edge, but sometimes, manufacturers push too far, creating machines so wild, so untamed, they become more beast than bike. From unpredictable death machines to straight-up rider killers, these are the 7 most dangerous motorcycles ever built. Number 7. Kawasaki H2 Mach 4 750. There are motorcycles that demand respect, and then there are motorcycles that demand fear. The Kawasaki H2 Mach 4 750 did not care if you were ready. It was a two-stroke monster built for drag strips, not for sanity. It quickly gained a reputation as one of the most dangerous production bikes to ever hit the road. Released in 1972, this machine was born during an era when manufacturers were locked in a horsepower war, each racing to outdo the other in speed, power, and shock value. Kawasaki's answer to the madness came in the form of a 748cc air-cooled inline 3-cylinder 2-stroke engine. And while it was built to thrill, it ended up terrifying an entire generation of riders. On paper, the numbers were impressive: 74 horsepower and a top speed nearing 120 miles per hour. The H2 Mach 4 looked like a winner, but those numbers only tell part of the story. What really made it dangerous was how it delivered that power. The throttle response was violent. 1 second you were cruising, the next you were clinging to the handlebars for dear life. Torque came in hard at around 57 pound-feet, and it hit with no warning, often lifting the front wheel with zero input from the rider. It was not a motorcycle that asked questions, it simply launched. At 454 pounds dry, it was relatively light for the amount of power it carried, but the chassis and suspension weren't built to handle that kind of muscle. The tubular steel frame flexed under pressure, especially in high-speed corners, and the front forks struggled to keep the front wheel planted when the power came on. Even the brakes felt like an afterthought. A single front disc and a rear drum had to contend with a machine that wanted nothing more than to break free. Stopping distances were long, and brake fade kicked in quickly under aggressive use. For a motorcycle capable of triple-digit speeds, this kind of braking setup was a gamble, at best. Fuel economy hovered around 29 miles per gallon, but no one looked at the H2 as a touring bike. This was a missile in street clothes. Every ride felt like it might be your last, and that was both the appeal and the warning label. What truly sealed its legend, though, wasn't just the performance, it was the nickname it earned. Riders and magazines alike began calling it the Widowmaker. That label wasn't hyperbole. Stories circulated of riders getting tossed off during wheelies, of high-speed wobbles that turned into violent crashes, and of engines that demanded respect but gave no forgiveness. The Kawasaki H2 Mach 4 750 was not built to be safe, it was built to dominate, and for those who underestimated it, the consequences were often brutal. Number 6. Suzuki TL-1000S. Sometimes danger doesn't come from brute power alone, it comes from unpredictability. And the Suzuki TL-1000S, launched in 1997, was the kind of motorcycle that didn't just surprise riders, it terrified them. This bike was Suzuki's bold entry into the world of big V-twin sport bikes, aimed squarely at rivals like the Ducati V-twin series. And while it had the performance to make headlines, it made a name for itself in a very different way. The TL-1000S was a machine with serious attitude, and one very serious flaw. Underneath its aggressive styling was a 996cc, liquid-cooled, 90-degree V-twin engine. The engine itself was a masterpiece, producing 125 horsepower and around 78 pound-feet of torque. That much power in a relatively light motorcycle, just 458 pounds wet, should have made it a top performer. And in many ways, it was. Acceleration was sharp and immediate. The TL pulled hard through the rev range, delivering a strong kick in the mid-range that made every twist of the throttle feel explosive. Top speed? Around 160 miles per hour. On paper, this was a dream bike. But the dream turned into a nightmare when riders started pushing it to the limit. The trouble was in the rear suspension. Suzuki had opted for a rotary-style rear damper instead of a traditional shock. It was meant to save space and deliver smooth response, but in reality, it was unpredictable and prone to overheating. As the rear damper got hot, damping performance faded. Riders reported rear-end wallow and instability, especially under hard acceleration or aggressive cornering. That instability often triggered what's known as a tank slapper, a violent back-and-forth motion of the handlebars that could end in a crash before the rider even knew what happened. Suzuki attempted to fix the problem by adding a steering damper in later models and issuing recalls, but the damage was done. The reputation stuck, and the TL-1000S quickly became known as one of the scariest motorcycles of its era. Braking performance was solid, with dual front discs and a single rear disc, but even that couldn't fully tame the chassis when the rear started misbehaving. Fuel economy averaged around 37 miles per gallon, which was respectable for a bike in this class, but let's be honest, few people were riding it for efficiency. The TL-1000S was bold, beautiful, and dangerous. It was a machine that could perform brilliantly one moment and bite the next. Riders either loved it or feared it, sometimes both. Number 5. Kawasaki H1 Mach 3 500. It's not often that a motorcycle earns a reputation before the rider even turns the key, but the Kawasaki H1 Mach 3 500 was different. From the moment it arrived in 1969, it was surrounded by a mixture of awe, admiration, and genuine fear. This was Kawasaki's bold move to create the fastest production motorcycle in the world, and they succeeded. But speed came at a cost. The H1 Mach 3 was powered by a 499cc two-stroke inline three-cylinder engine that produced an eye-opening 60 horsepower. That might sound tame by today's standards, but back then, it was like strapping a rocket to a lawn chair. With a dry weight of just 384 pounds, the power-to-weight ratio was downright aggressive. It could hit 60 miles per hour in under 4 seconds, making it one of the quickest bikes off the line in its day. But what really caught riders off guard was how that power came on. It was abrupt, violent, and delivered with very little warning. Torque was rated at 37 pound-feet, and like most two-strokes, it hit all at once in the upper rev range. The result? A motorcycle that constantly wanted to lift its front wheel or spin the rear tire, depending on how lucky you were. Novice riders often found themselves overwhelmed, and even experienced ones struggled to tame the beast when the throttle cracked open. Unfortunately, the handling didn't keep pace with the engine. The chassis was narrow and flexed under load. Cornering at speed felt more like an act of faith than an act of control. The swing arm and suspension were basic at best, and the limited ground clearance made aggressive riding a risky game. Braking was handled by a front drum brake and a rear drum as well, standard at the time but nowhere near adequate for a bike capable of speeds over 115 miles per hour. Stopping required planning, space, and sometimes a bit of luck. Fuel economy hovered around 26 miles per gallon, which made sense considering how aggressively the bike was often ridden. But riders weren't buying the H1 for comfort or efficiency, they wanted speed. What they got was something closer to controlled chaos. Despite all of this, or maybe because of it, the H1 Mach 3 500 developed a cult following. It was thrilling, raw, and unapologetic. But it also had a dark side. Stories of riders being thrown off, high-speed crashes, and terrifying front-end wobbles became part of the bike's legend. The Kawasaki H1 wasn't just fast, it was dangerous in a way few bikes have ever been. It delivered performance ahead of its time, but without the engineering to match. And that made every ride feel like a coin toss between excitement and disaster. Number 4. Suzuki GSX-R 1100. Some motorcycles look fast standing still, but the Suzuki GSX-R 1100 did more than just look the part. It terrified riders the moment they twisted the throttle. Introduced in the late 80s and refined throughout the early 90s, this machine was one of the first true superbikes to combine massive engine performance with minimal electronic assistance. At the core of the GSX-R 1100 was a 1,136cc oil and air-cooled inline four-cylinder engine. It delivered a massive 145 horsepower, a staggering figure for its time. But horsepower alone wasn't what made this bike dangerous. It was how that power was delivered in a machine that often felt just one step away from losing control. With a wet weight of around 593 pounds, the GSX-R was not exactly lightweight. But the engine's explosive power delivery made the bike feel like it wanted to launch forward with every blip of the throttle. Torque figures sat at around 85 lb-ft, coming on strong through the mid-range and pulling relentlessly all the way to the red line. The bike could reach top speeds of approximately 175 mph, making it one of the fastest production motorcycles of its time. But speed alone wasn't the issue. The real problem was how the bike behaved at those speeds. The frame, while strong for the era, lacked the stiffness needed to truly handle the engine's aggression. High-speed wobbles, especially on uneven pavement, were not uncommon. Riders also had to contend with brakes that struggled to keep up with the bike's performance. Dual front discs and a single rear disc were standard, But without advanced braking systems or anti-lock features, stopping quickly required both experience and a careful touch. Many riders found themselves in trouble not because of how fast they were going, but because they couldn't slow down safely once they got there. Fuel economy hovered around 33 mpg, but few riders ever cared. The GSX-R wasn't about commuting or comfort, it was about power, prestige, and the thrill of riding on the edge. Even the riding position was aggressive, forcing the rider into a low, stretched-out stance that made long trips exhausting, but high-speed bursts exhilarating. What made the GSX-R 1100 especially dangerous was its lack of forgiveness. There were no electronic rider aids, no traction control, no mercy. Every decision was in the rider's hands, and mistakes were rarely small. It demanded complete attention and punished overconfidence brutally. The Suzuki GSX-R 1100 remains one of the most iconic superbikes of its era. But behind the speed and status lies a machine that reminded riders just how thin the line between control and catastrophe can really be. Agree with the lineup? Or is there a bike even scarier that we missed? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit like if you dared to ride one, and subscribe for more insane motorcycle content. Number 3. Suzuki TM400 Cyclone. Some motorcycles are dangerous because they're fast, others are dangerous because they're unpredictable. The Suzuki TM400 Cyclone, introduced in 1971, managed to be both. And that's what made it truly terrifying. This was a motocross bike that earned its reputation not from winning races, but from violently throwing its riders off course. At the center of the Cyclone was a 396cc, air-cooled single-cylinder two-stroke engine. Designed during the early boom of motocross popularity, Suzuki wanted a bike that could dominate the fast-growing American market. What they ended up producing was a machine that became infamous for all the wrong reasons. The engine produced around 40 horsepower, which might not sound extreme by today's standards, but it was delivered in a way that felt like a sudden explosion. There was no smooth power band, just a violent surge of torque, roughly 34 lb-ft that kicked in all at once. Many riders described the throttle response as an on-off switch. Either you were crawling or you were flying. Weighing only around 220 pounds dry, the bike was frighteningly light for the amount of power it delivered. That lightness made the front wheel incredibly prone to lifting, especially under hard acceleration. Riders frequently found themselves doing unintended wheelies, or worse, being launched over the handlebars if they rolled off the throttle too quickly. Handling was another major issue. The frame flexed under stress, which made the bike feel unstable in corners. The suspension, though standard for its time, did little to absorb the punishment the engine dished out. The rear shocks in particular were known for bottoming out, adding even more chaos to an already wild ride. Braking was handled by drum brakes front and rear, typical for the era, but not ideal for a bike that could reach speeds close to 70 mph in off-road conditions. The lack of consistent stopping power only added to the danger, especially when combined with the twitchy throttle and unpredictable chassis behavior. Fuel economy was never a selling point. Riders averaged somewhere around 23 miles per gallon, but no one bought the TM400 Cyclone to save gas. It was meant to win races. Unfortunately, it often ended those races early, sometimes with the rider limping off the track. What truly cemented its legacy, though, was the sheer number of crashes and injuries associated with it. The Cyclone was considered so difficult to handle that it earned nicknames like the hand grenade and the bone breaker. Even professional riders struggled to tame it, and many abandoned it altogether in favor of more stable competition. The Suzuki TM400 Cyclone was a bold attempt to dominate motocross. Instead, it became a cautionary tale. It taught riders one painful lesson: power means nothing if you cannot control it. Number 2, Harley-Davidson Sportster S. Every once in a while, a motorcycle comes along that looks sleek and powerful, but hides a personality that is far more volatile than expected. The Harley-Davidson Sportster S is one of those bikes. Reimagined and relaunched in the early 2020s, this machine marked a dramatic shift for Harley, swapping out old-school charm for raw, aggressive performance. And with that shift came a level of danger few riders anticipated. At the core of the Sportster S is a 1,253cc liquid-cooled V-twin engine known as the Revolution Max. This engine produces a staggering 121 horsepower and 94 pound-feet of torque. That kind of power in a stripped-down cruiser platform was not just unexpected, it was extreme. The bike delivers instant acceleration, with enough thrust to catch even experienced riders off guard if they're not fully focused. The Sportster S weighs in at just over 502 pounds, wet weight, making it light for a Harley. But that low weight, combined with the aggressive engine map, creates a machine that feels twitchy and unstable when pushed. The throttle is razor sharp. While that adds excitement, it also increases the risk of over-acceleration, especially for riders transitioning from more traditional cruisers. Top speed is electronically limited but still reaches around 130 mph. That might not be superbike territory, but how the Sportster S gets there is what sets it apart. The power hits hard. With a short wheelbase and a low-slung design, the bike can feel unsettled at high speeds, especially on uneven pavement or in heavy crosswinds. The suspension setup is sporty but stiff, with inverted front forks and a single rear monoshock. It prioritizes performance over comfort. While it helps with stability and straight-line acceleration, it does not absorb bumps well, potentially leading to traction loss in rough corners. Combined with a wide front tire that prefers straight paths, the bike resists lean-in and can feel reluctant in tight curves. It's not exactly nimble. Fuel economy hovers around 49 miles per gallon, which is solid for a performance cruiser. The fuel tank holds just under 4 gallons, but range was never the selling point. Power and style were. The minimalist design removes traditional Harley weight but also strips away many of the small features that help balance more aggressive machines. Braking is handled by a single front disc and a rear disc, with Brembo calipers providing the stopping power. While adequate, a single front rotor on a bike with this much speed feels like a compromise. Under heavy braking, the front can dive sharply, and riders report inconsistent feedback during emergency stops. The Harley-Davidson Sportster S is not inherently flawed. It's just aggressive by nature. It's fast, striking, and built for performance. But for riders expecting a laid-back cruiser, this bike delivers a wake-up call. In the wrong hands, it's not just unforgiving, it's dangerous. Number 1. Kawasaki Ninja H2R. There are fast motorcycles, there are powerful motorcycles, and then there is the Kawasaki Ninja H2R, a machine so extreme it had to be banned from public roads. This is not just a superbike, it is a statement of pure mechanical insanity, designed with one goal in mind: to be the fastest and most powerful production motorcycle on Earth. At its core lies a 998cc liquid-cooled inline four-cylinder engine. But what truly sets it apart is the centrifugal supercharger bolted to its side, an innovation rarely seen outside of drag strips and racetracks. The result? An earth-shaking 310 horsepower, or 326 horsepower with ram air, making the H2R the most powerful production motorcycle ever built. Torque is just as aggressive, coming in at 115 lb-ft, delivered in a relentless wave that feels like it never ends. This kind of force can catapult the bike from 0 to 60 mph in under 2.5 seconds. But more than the speed, it's the way the power hits, sudden, violent, and completely overwhelming, that makes this bike a true danger in the wrong hands. The H2R weighs just under 476 pounds, wet weight, an impressive figure considering the massive power plant it carries. Its lightweight trellis frame, carbon fiber fairings, and aerodynamic winglets make it feel more like a guided missile than a motorcycle. At full tilt, the bike can reach speeds north of 240 mph, a number that puts it in direct competition with high-end supercars and even aircraft on short runways. Braking is handled by Brembo monoblock calipers and oversized dual front discs, offering incredible stopping force. But even with top-shelf components, bringing this monster to a halt from such high speeds is a task few riders will ever truly master. The Kawasaki Ninja H2R is not street legal for a reason. It is too powerful, too fast, and too unforgiving for public roads. Motorcycles are built to thrill, but this one, it's built to terrify and to dominate. These are the 7 most dangerous motorcycles ever built. Did we miss a bike that deserves a spot on this list? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more motorcycle content, and as always, ride safe. See you in the next one.